Have you ever wondered how a superpower, one of the two most powerful nations on Earth, could just disappear? That's exactly what happened in 1989. The world just watched as the Soviet Union didn't just decline, it completely imploded. So today, we're going to unpack how this seemingly indestructible giant vanished from the map in just a couple of years.
To really get this story, we can't start in Moscow. We have to start in Berlin. Our story kicks off with the fall of a single, incredibly powerful symbol that had split a city, and really the whole world, for decades.
For 28 long years, the Berlin Wall was it. It was the symbol of the Cold War, a literal concrete barrier between two ways of life. But then, on November 9th, 1989, it came down. And it wasn't torn down by an army or a treaty, it was toppled by ordinary people. This single act of defiance was like the first major crack in a massive dam.
And you've got to understand, this was so much more than just Germany reuniting. Think of it as the first domino. Its fall set off a chain reaction that would sweep across Eastern Europe, end the Cold War, and eventually bring down the Soviet Union itself. The end didn't come with a bang from a missile, but with the roar of a crowd.
Okay, so the wall was the first crack. But to understand why the entire building came crashing down, we need to take a look at what that wall was holding up in the first place. What even was the Soviet system? What was it all about?
The USSR, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was basically one of the biggest, most ambitious experiments in human history. The whole idea was to consciously design a society built on total equality. You do that by getting rid of private property and putting the state in charge of, well, everything. It was meant to be the great socialist alternative to capitalism.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, the huge gap between the ideal and the reality. On paper, it was this dream of an equal society where the state takes care of everyone. But for the people living it, the reality was a bureaucratic, authoritarian nightmare. There was no free speech, no real democracy, just a single, unaccountable party running the show, with Russia pretty much dominating the 14 other republics in the Union.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. I mean, if this system was a global superpower and had been around for over 70 years, how on earth did it fall apart so suddenly? And this is more than just a dusty old history question. Figuring out how such a powerful, dug-in system can just collapse, well, it tells us a lot about politics, power, and what happens when things start to change.
See, the collapse wasn't just one thing. It was a slow burn of deep, deep problems. The economy was stuck in mud, it couldn't keep up with the West in tech or even in basic things you could buy in a store, all while it was bleeding money on a massive arms race with the US. And the whole thing was run by this corrupt, clunky bureaucracy that couldn't admit when it was wrong, let alone fix anything. But maybe the biggest blow was psychological. As people started to get glimpses of life in the West, they realized, wow, we have been left way, way behind.
Then, in 1985, a new leader steps onto the scene, Mikhail Gorbachev. And here's the great irony. His goal wasn't to destroy the Soviet Union, he was trying to save it, to fix it, by making it more modern and more open.
So he brought in these two big ideas. First was perestroika, which means restructuring, basically trying to kickstart the dead economy. And the second was glasnost, or openness, which was all about loosening the government's grip and allowing more freedom of speech. He thought he was just opening a window to let in a little fresh air. What he didn't realize was that he was opening Pandora's box. This old Soviet joke absolutely nails what happened next. It perfectly captures what glasnost did. For decades, everyone had to pretend the system was working, that there were mountains of potatoes. But openness meant people could finally turn around and say, yeah, actually, there are no potatoes. People started speaking up, and suddenly the government couldn't control the story anymore. And just look at this timeline. Look how fast everything spiraled out of control. Gorbachev starts his reforms in '85. Just 4 years later, boom, the Berlin Wall falls. The very next year, Lithuania declares independence, which was a huge deal. And by the end of 1991, it's all over. After a failed coup by communist hardliners, the Soviet Union is officially gone. The forces Gorbachev set in motion were just too powerful to stop. So, you've got a broken economy and reforms that are backfiring spectacularly. But there was one last, decisive push that sent the whole thing right over the edge.
And that final unstoppable force was nationalism. The deep desire inside the different republics to just be their own country proved to be the killer blow. People stopped thinking of themselves as Soviet citizens and started thinking of themselves as Russians or Ukrainians or Lithuanians.
And here's the twist nobody saw coming. For years, all the experts thought that if there was going to be trouble, it would come from the poorer, ethnically different republics in Central Asia. But nope, the biggest push for independence actually came from the richer, more European parts of the Union, like Russia itself, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. They basically decided they were paying way too much to prop up the rest of the Union and wanted out.
So the Soviet Union was gone. Just like that, it was wiped off the world map. And its disappearance left a massive power vacuum that completely changed the global order.
The fallout was just immense. I mean, first, the Cold War was finally over. The epic ideological struggle that defined the 20th century was done. Second, that whole world order balanced between two superpowers, gone. And third, you suddenly have 15 new countries on the map, all trying to figure out who they are.
And with the collapse of the so-called Second World, the planet was left with only one superpower, the United States. For the first time in almost half a century, the world was unipolar, and the capitalist economy was pretty much the only game in town.
This map just shows you how dramatic the change was. The entire political landscape was redrawn. 15 new nations, from the Baltics all the way to Central Asia. Russia took over the old Soviet seat at the UN, but now it was just one country among many new independent nations, all starting to forge their own way in the world. And that really brings us to our final thought here. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a pretty stark reminder that no political system, no matter how powerful it seems, is permanent. It forces us to ask a really important question today. What are the lessons here? What happens when a system just stops working for its people and the desire for change becomes a force that no one can control?